Okay, I just wanted to show you the build part of this thing. First part I started off with, here's the container that catches the primers on the bottom of the machine. So the first thing I had to start with is this plate. So pull that off. I don't use that, I just put a bucket under the machine. So there's your plate right there. Now everything I've done so far, it's only two sizes of metal. I used 3/16 by 3 flat plate and 1 by 1 16th inch wall square tubing, and that was just got at Lowe's. So right now I've got like 25 bucks invested in this thing. So the first thing I had to do is figure out how to hook up the arm to the bottom of the machine. So here's a piece of that 3 by 3, and if I line this up over top of everything, then I'll get all the holes to line up like that. So that would be the primer discharge right there. This would be the wire that goes up to the powder hopper, and then you have your two mounting screws underneath here. And I'm considering drilling another hole on the other side of the machine. There's enough meat that I can get another screw into here, so it'll give me 3 fastening points. That was that piece there. Right now I don't have that many pieces made up. Now the next piece would be on the part that's going to come from the top of this. I'm going to have an L bracket, and I'll show you that. I'm going to have to raise the camera here and get a good view of this. Okay, so we have that attaches to the machine. Then I made a L bracket out of that 1 by 1 tubing I was telling you about. That's the thin wall, and that's what I want. I want to keep it as light as I can, so I wasn't lifting a lot of weight on this. So that'll attach to this plate here like this. This'll get welded on to this piece right here. It actually goes this way. I had to do these notches here because when you lower the handle on the press, this would be the center leg of the handle and this would be the side leg. So I needed clearance, but I wanted to create as much surface area on this thing as possible. So that would attach to that. So I'll just take that out of the way, put that aside. Now this would be the actual feeder tube for the casing. This is all real long right now. I got to figure that all out. I'll put the half notch in here for the case. This is just a piece of oak that I had. I may get a piece of Dillon down the road. The stuff is really expensive. So if this works, fine. If not, then I'll have to get some Dillon. But I'll have to machine this end down a little bit and do some notching up here. Then there'll have to be a hole up here where the case can drop down. And you know, I'll just have to fiddle with that, and then I can determine my length on that. But I got this fit in here pretty good. So that's that part of it. Now this, on this L bracket, this is coming up from the machine. Now I need to, and I wasn't sure exactly where things were going to line up, so I needed a little bit of movement. So I made this bracket up. It's just a piece of plate. I tapped it for 1/4 and left the stud stick up just a little bit, and I welded it to the plate, so those studs are attached to that. Then I have some 1/4 nuts that now I have adjustment, so I can loosen them up. This piece here will get welded to this, and then this will get, if I can put it back in the right direction here, like that. This will get another nut on the bottom. Let's just do one for now to show you. Okay, now this will get welded. Once I get everything figured out, I got to figure out the length of this. This will get welded to there. Now I can raise and lower. I made these holes a little bit bigger, so I got some wiggle, and I can always make them a little bigger if I need more adjustment. then this will get welded at an angle, so this will feed into the machine. So that's pretty much all the parts right now. Two main parts of steel, 3/16 by 3 and 1 by 1 thin wall square tubing. So that's pretty much all that. So before I get tacking everything together, I just wanted to show you these pieces. And there was nothing out there, so I had to really, you know, look at things and see how it was put together and see if it was even feasible. So that's the parts of this so far, and I'll show it to you after I tack it together. Alright, I got everything welded up here. The welds aren't the prettiest of the world, but all I got is a stick welder and oxyacetylene, and it's got to stick. It's tough welding, thin material up to thicker material. But now everything's assembled here. You can see I have the bottom plate mounted to this. This gets mounted to the bottom of the machine, and as the ram goes up and down, this whole unit goes up and down. I have the feed tube set up. I silver soldered a stud onto here. I'll show you how that works. You can see the adjusting plate with the nuts on there. I drilled out the holes even bigger so I can move this thing side to side, up and down, and get this all set up. I cut the notch in the top here. You can see that, so the bolt feeds into it. I got that piece of oak I was showing you. I got that all fit. I got the notch in it. I had to do some notching at the bottom so it goes into the plate for the press itself. So that works out pretty good. On the back here, I have a little coupler that I silver soldered a piece of wire to. This is the thinnest picture hanging wire I could find, and I'll show you how that all works, and that's attached to a threaded rod. So that would go back to this unit here like this, and now you can see the rod will come out, and then a case would be pushed out. So we have that. I cut a slot on the side because I needed a return spring. I was trying to figure out how I was going to put a return spring in, so I just had a pin that I machined up on the lathe. That goes into there. Now it stops to there. Spring, I had to rebend to one end to get a little more tension on it. Now that goes to that point right there. Now it has tension that it'll pull back onto. So that's that. The next piece I made a tail piece right here out of a chunk of wood. That would go into the end like this. This is all leading up to how it's activated. This would go into here like that. Then I got a nylon wheel, and all this stuff I picked up at the local hardware store. They're pretty good. They got some oddball stuff, and they're always willing to give me a hand on my crazy projects. That bolt will go through there, and I still have a lot of grinding to clean this thing up. So now here's the unit. Let me throw a clamp on this thing and maybe go up a little higher so you can see everything that I'm doing here. So let me put a clamp on it and see if this camera will go up a little higher. Okay, it's not going to go up higher. Hold on a minute and I'll readjust. Okay, now you can see the whole unit right here. Now I have a rod that's mounted to the bench. This gets mounted to the rod, so as this raises, then this actually makes it activate the case feeder. Next thing I'm going to do, they had some nice bronze bushings down at the hardware store. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take this right here, I'm going to silver solder that in place there. I already have it marked, so then when the case comes down, into there. This pulls back, that'll drop, and that'll push the case right out. So that'll just go like that. So that's about where I am with that. Now I got to figure out how it's going to drop out of the case feeder itself. I already started on the second unit here. This has been driving me absolutely wild how all this is going to work. And I wanted to do it mechanical because I just wanted to do it that way. A lot of guys would have just put a solenoid at the top of this thing. But this will be mounted to another bracket going off the bench. And as this gets close to this, that activates this second rod here, like this. And that'll be enough to drop a casing. Once I get that located right into there, there'll be another bushing mounted right to there, and then my case feeder would feed into that. Only one case will drop, come over and drop it into this unit here. So when I get that made up, I'll show you that, and I'll have it hooked up to the machine. So it was a couple more trips to the hardware store. I think I spent another 20 bucks on bushings and little wheels and stuff like that. These are just little wheels that were for sliding bifold doors, you know, some nuts and whatnot, springs, but you know, all this stuff I got at the hardware store. So I'm going to keep on going on it. It's driving me nuts, and I'm pretty much possessed on this thing. So I'll get this thing figured out and show you the end result. Okay, I got all the parts welded up here. This is the part that's going to hook onto the press itself, hooks onto the bottom of the ram. There's the base plate that I showed you in the early stages. I had to add a diagonal to this. There was a little bit of flex in this plate. Probably should have went with a 1/4 inch. This is 3/16. Would have gave it a little bit more rigidity. Part of it is because these notches took a lot of support out, but they're required for the handle to fit through. Here, there's a little V-notch right here. That had to be put in because the corner bushing on the press itself was right there, so I had to make clearance for that. I'll show you that when it gets mounted to the machine. So this part is ready to go. We can assemble that. The other part I did here, this is that bronze bushing I showed you. I overbored the top of this thing, and I don't know if I can get enough light in there for you to see, but you can see I bored it out pretty heavy on the top, but I left the bottom at the original 1/2 inch. So this way, when the other part of this is hanging over, because they have to line up pretty good, it allows the case, it has plenty of room. If it's misaligned just a little bit, it can still hit the target there and get into the machine. So this is the block that I showed you before. I got that all mounted up to the wire. That would just slide in to there. Got everything fit nice and inside there, polished out. I even waxed the inside of the tube just to make everything go good. So there's your stop. There's your spring. There. So now that all just slides nice and smooth. The only thing else that has to go on, this is the tail block with the nylon wheel in there. That would just slide onto this unit here, out like that, and that'll come out like that. That slides into there. Now when it gets hooked to the bench, it'll activate the rod itself. And for that, I made up another piece of steel here. Overkill, but it's just what I had in stock. This mounts to the bottom of the bench, to the 2 holes there, and then I just have a small hole there with that threaded rod will be mounted to. So that's that unit there. Then we have the other unit, which is right over here. This will sit on top of that one, and there's my bushing here. This is where my case feeder would hook to. It took a lot of figuring out where everything was going to be on this thing. Did manage to clean up some of my nasty welds on this thing, but that's the whole unit there. So to put that together, we have to go with, now here's my other plug that goes inside. There's the hole there. This only moves about 5/8 of an inch, because when you're dealing with a bell crank, this is the activator here. When you're dealing with a bell crank, the more this thing tilts down, the harder the resistance gets. So if you can keep it closer, then it moves nice and easy. So we got that. This would slide in this way, and that's got the nylon wheel in there. That's where the bell crank hooks onto, so that'll slide in nice and easy that side. And then we have our pin that goes into there. Then we have the bell crank here, and we got to put our screw in right to here. Oh, come on. All right, there's that. Okay. And we need our spring. And that'll hook from here to here. And I did have to put an extra stop on this. Now this sits down and it's really easy to move. I mean, it's no pressure, so you're not putting a lot of extra wear and tear on the machine from things getting moved. Now, if you can see inside there, that bushing, let's see if I can get some light in there, but that's in there now. Of course, I can't hold this thing and do it all at the same time, but if you can see, the hole lines up. The casing would go into there, and then when this comes forward, and if I turn this around, when that comes forward, then that hole lines up there. Then the case would drop from here into this tube here. So the next step is to get this hooked up to the bench, and it's a little bit of a nuisance getting everything lined up, but once it's lined up, everything works pretty good. So we'll take it from there next. Okay, I just wanted to show you before I started assembling this to the machine, I had to really reinforce the machine because it was flexing on this 3/4 inch plywood here. So luckily I had a piece of 1/2 inch angle iron that I mounted to the bench here, and then screwed it through the machine into that. So that made this thing like really rock solid now. So you can see I just had that from another project years ago, but now that's mounted to the bench and to the top of the bench and the frame of the bench. So that gives me a real good solid platform to work from. Then from there I mounted 4 screws right here. I think they're 5/16. I just got some threaded rod. They're drilled through the plate also, so when the top's mounted to that, it's really rock solid. So, but that's an important thing, that things don't shake around a lot on you. So I just wanted to point that out before we get going here, okay? Okay, I have the first piece mounted to the machine now. I'm just checking for an alignment, but I got this set up pretty good. And you can see as I raise the ram up, you can see the plunger retracts there. If I can get a good shot of this thing here, let's try that. And you'll see it goes up. comes down like that. That's all controlled. That's all controlled from this tailpiece here. So I can get a shot of it, and as that goes up, it pulls on the wire itself and makes everything retract. So it takes a little bit of fine balancing to get the whole thing working out. Underneath here, all I did was, those are where the screws were for the primer cup deal. I put studs in there and thread locked them into it, and that's how the bottom plate works for that. So just to show you how this works out, I'll just hand feed this for a couple cases here, and as we go up, goes down, goes in, and I'll just hand feed this a couple times, and goes in like that, and it goes in like that. The timing of this whole thing is controlled by how much space you have here. You need a little bit of space here so this isn't tight. If it's too tight, then it'll throw the timing off and then the shells will hit the plate. So just to show you how this whole thing works out is, I'll just take a tube like that and like that, and I'll just hand feed this tube. Now there's still the second part of this that has to get hooked up, but I had to do this first to kind of figure out how this whole thing was going to how to work. So I had to create the first piece before I could create the second piece. Okay, so that's full of casings right there. So as we go down, you can just see excuse my shaking hand, I'm trying to work the press, and that's all in there now. So next I got to get the second part of this unit hooked up and aligned. So that's that part. Okay, I got the second unit mounted up and aligned now. So that's how that whole thing works. So as it comes up, it'll feed a case there. You can see the wheels in the back activating the top part of that. So what I'll do, let me raise this up just a hair. And so this is where the case feeder would hook to right here. Drop a case into there, and you hear a drop. It's into the bottom unit now. Now the bottom unit goes, and that pushes it into the shell plate. And then we'll just do that again. And you can hear it kick. I left all the holes for all the mounting all large because I didn't know exactly how this thing had to be aligned, so I'm glad I did that, because to have everything precisely lined up was a real chore. So with that being done, I'll just grab my bushing once again and knock the camera like that, and I'll hook up this to, this is where the case feeder will hook up to, and I'll just do a simulation here, and then I'll just load that up with some shells. Oh, that one went in backwards. Alright, not a big deal. I can get them to come out like that. Alright, big thing is you gotta put them in the correct way. Okay. And a couple more. And we don't have to go crazy on this. That's good enough. Now, okay, let me see if I can give you a different angle on this. Come back to where I don't have it in the way of my handle. And so that's how that all works. So that's about it here. Put this out of the way. That gets pushed over. And I'll see if I can give you a shot of when the casing drops down from the two tubes. So come into there, and right now it's gonna come in, it's gonna load it, and you can just see the case drop straight down into that, and it comes over, and then that pushes right into the shell plate. So that's my my adventure with this mechanism here. Next thing is I got to get my case feeder hooked up to this thing. Right now I got it about a mile high because you know, I didn't want to modify that until I had this all done. So I'll jerry rig that together and I'll show you the, you know, the case feeder hooked to it. It's just not finalized yet.